I've seen some lasting side effects with Sarms, where it like crushes livers, like literally crushes lipid profiles, like bad. Like Sarms, I've seen worse than actual testosterone and stuff like that. I've seen kidneys, I've seen liver. I mean, every single thing in the book, but I've seen it like more exponential with Sarms, which is super interesting because everyone's like, oh, they're so safe. And we've already dove into this topic, but Sarms have more of a lasting effect that I've seen than more of the steroid aspect of it. Interestingly enough.
So that's actually what I was researching with at that time. So when I go back, probably in September or something like that, I'll go back and get my blood work done again. And it'll be interesting to see if I've been able to manipulate. So I've made some dietary changes during that time period. I didn't add like any red yeast rice or krill oil, but I wanted to test it first with just lifestyle stuff first. But it will be interesting to see if that's still the case when I go back in there.
Yep.
What about
any specific SARMs that you saw that were worse than others, or was there one that you consistently saw crushing liver and kidney stuff?
All of them?
Literally all of them. Literally. Really? And the funny thing is most of the blood work that I've seen is with the Austrian at lower dosages for a male. Like I'm talking like 15 milligrams of Austrian, and I've seen just crush. Crush.
There's one study that a lot of people don't realize on LGD in young men. So it's around 76 people in this study. And
that's a big study.
And they did it on men that were relatively young, like early 20s to like in their mid 30s, I think it was. They gave them 0.1 milligrams. So yeah.
It's like nothing.
And then they went up to 1 milligram per day for 20 days. And then they showed some blood worker. Yeah, it's a very interesting study to take a look at. I did a video on it, but you can see like their cholesterol's messed up. I don't know if they tracked their liver, but in a different study they did track their liver, and you get to see all this stuff that.
Oh my god, it's scary, the blood work that I've seen, because like people talk about how safe it is, and like LGD, it's normal like 20 milligrams, right? That's like a normal thing,
and then they're taking 20 times what they did in the study.
Yeah. Well, and so the issue with SARMs is they literally cannot pass toxicity tests. Like they can't. And I got a message like when I posted it publicly, right? I posted a YouTube video on SARMs versus gear. And I went pretty much into details about blood work that I was seeing. Like I literally have hard proof of it. And they're like, and someone was laughing and they're like, well, can Anadrol or D-bol pass a toxicity test? I'm like, yes, it is a legal drug. Yes, it can. I was like, imagine that. Like the harshest steroid, well, not the harshest steroid, but one of the harshest steroids can pass the toxicity test, but SARMs cannot. And they've tried over and over again, and they're trying for years. They think that Austrian may sneak it in there eventually, but even that, they can't figure out the clinical dosage. And the issue is to pass the toxicity test, they superdose it, right? Everything gets superdosed to make sure that it's actually safe for humans before they even go to like mammal trials and then human trials kind of thing. So I just thought it was funny. Like I got that DM, like, the guy owns a SARM company, right? And but he respects my opinion. I'm like, dude, I was like, no, I'm telling you right now, yes, it does. Like Anadrol is legal, FDA legal drug.
But it's also, I've seen some blood work too where it doesn't have a tremendous amount, because they did another study on rad. This is on women, but they gave them 150 milligrams of rad per day. 150 milligrams per day.
Of what?
Rad, RAD 150 or 40.
Oh, rad. Okay, yeah.
And what I remember is them just talking about a couple transitory issues with the liver enzymes being elevated, but I don't remember seeing stuff that was impacting cholesterol greatly, or maybe it wasn't checked in that one. I don't remember, but like that would be, 150 milligrams of rad
that's insane.
Destroy.
I mean, I just it's at 10 milligrams, and I mean, it has profound effects. I mean, my hair, if I would brush my hair, like I would normally have like 4 or 5, I would have like 10. It actually gave me headaches for about a week, not like hardcore, but I would get a headache here and there. And I was like, man, is this stuff killing my brain? But it adds strength and hardness, and that's what it does. But what's interesting is Tylenol wouldn't pass a toxicity test right now. But it was, but that shit, you can buy that shit at Walmart.
Correct.
Yeah. But I guess
I'm a fan of Sarms. Like, I enjoy researching with Sarms. I think they're like, I don't actually research with a lot of gear, and I just research with Sarms. But one of the things that Sarms definitely affects, as well as testosterone, or can affect, is fertility. So let's talk about fertility for a second, because that's something that my girlfriend and I have been talking about potentially having a kid next year. So this fall, I'm going to do a sperm analysis to check my shit, and then start testing stuff, and then check it in again a couple months later. What are you guys' thoughts on testosterone and fertility?
It's like the common, it's not necessarily a myth, but people say, well, if you're on testosterone, you're infertile. You can just do whatever you want, and there's be no babies coming 9 months later. And obviously, it definitely lowers your swimmer count. There's no question, but there are. There's professional wrestlers, professional bodybuilders that have like 2-3 kids. So, the swimmers can get through. Nature will always find a way.
I had a buddy who is probably in his late to mid 30s at this point, and he started gear when he was 17, 18 years old. And him and his wife they won't like to have a kid now. So starting in November or December of last year, he was like, okay, cool, I'll go see an endocrinologist, and I'll start, their protocol for, HCG and Clomid or whatever. And after about 6 months, I actually filmed a video with him, but it was so hard to keep him focused because his test levels were just like single digits. So I didn't even release the video because it was so bad.
Wow.
But after like 7 months, he still does not have any swimmers.
Wow.
So here's the thing. First off, Ronnie Coleman has like 8 or 9 kids. But, and I guarantee you he was on cycle year round.
He did like 3 grams at one point. He was telling me about, like, that's just a stupid amount. Like, you're doing like 3 grams of gear a week is a ridiculous amount.
So this is actually when I first started coaching like 5 or 6 years ago. One of my clients got on testosterone replacement therapy. And after like 5 months, he's like, so, man, I'm going to have to cancel the services. I just knocked her up. He's like, I guess you can get them pregnant. Heads up. So, like nature does take, but the thing is, like, I actually study under a fertility doctor. Like, that's his specialization. And he's trying to rewrite the books on testosterone replacement therapy and basically crushing this myth, because you can keep your testicles healthy while you're on testosterone. HCG does that. But the thing is, does HCG actually make you that fertile? Well, first off, you can be fertile on just testosterone and HCG. But with HCG, all that it does is increase your semen production. It's luteinizing hormone. There's one missing link to it, which is FSH. FSH is what's going to make you produce sperm. So the swimmers, you don't have as many, but you still have them. So you actually have to replace it. And like on the streets, right, what people are going to talk about is HMG, which is a gonal, but it's a combination of the gonals. It's a mixture where it has some FSH, it has some LH in it. What a fertility doctor, if they're specialized, they're going to basically control your LH and your FSH levels. So they're going to use a gonal F, which is FSH, and then they're going to use a luteinizing hormone, which is HCG. And guess what? You don't have to come off testosterone and feel like a female, not having sex drive and having to take Viagra every single time you want to have sex. And it feels forced every single time. You're like, oh, first off, I have pressure to get her pregnant. And then I have pressure to have sex right now, and I can't get an erection because I have no testosterone. So I'm going to take some Viagra and get a forced erection. I probably can't feel my dick because there's so much blood going into it right now. And like, it's like a concoction for not getting someone pregnant is getting off and like not being able to reboot.
So I agree that it's way more sensationalized than actual reality. I think it's for people that are in the TRT range. For most people, it's probably never going to be an issue. With my buddy, though, he took HCG 5,000 at one point, like, because they kept testing different shit. At one point, he was doing 5,000 3 times a week, HCG. Ooh, got his levels tested.
Protocol.
Yes. Oh, yeah. He would get these cases, anyways. But I'm going to go through so quick. You go through a vial every shot.
That's great.
So he got his levels tested. He had super high LH, obviously. He had good in-range testosterone, but 0 production. Came off about 2 weeks later. And so that goes down, and the test levels just tanked. There was no production. Like LH, he doesn't have any at this point, basically. So, but that's obviously that's an extreme dose. Like, and I don't mean to sensationalize that by talking about it all the time, but that was the experience that I had working with him on that thing. But because 99% of people, I think, like, I'm taking 225 milligrams. I don't think that it will probably be an issue. I mean, it could with the other stuff I experienced with, but I don't think it will be an issue.
What do you guys think? So, like your buddy, I mean, if he's taking all that HCG, do you think adding in some Clomid would have helped at all?
So he did Clomid for, I think, 3 months, and he was so irritable with his wife. He was saying, he was like, I was like a little bitch. Like I didn't even release the video.
Wow.
Like the conversation, he was over here, then he was over here, that's one of the issues of low testosterone, right?
Yeah.
He showed me some of his blood work, and he's got single digit testosterone, and it was very hard to even have a conversation because it was like all over the place. I do that sometimes, but it wasn't like mumbling or saying the same thing 3 or 4 times, and just there's no lack of focus. You had mentioned Dave, you had mentioned Cialis and using that as an aid to help with like ED or just getting your dick hard because you got low testosterone for fertility. Then you got that pressure. One of the things is some people, and I learned about this today, but is a desensitization to like their dick. Can you? I mean, I had that personal experience. I'll tell that story in a second. But like, what are you guys' thoughts on that? Like, can testosterone desensitize your penis so that it's harder to have sex, or that you basically, is that actually a superpower because then you actually last longer? For some guys, that's an issue.
I'd say personally, I haven't noticed that. Personally, I haven't noticed that. I've noticed that with Jack Daniels, but not for me, not Tess. But I'm gonna say that it's probably man per man, but that it definitely can happen. And I know David had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, like when I lost my virginity, we were talking about this right beforehand.
Here's where we get demonetized.
Yeah, exactly. It was 4 hours later, and I hadn't gotten off, and I thought it was normal, right? Yeah.
You thought that's what everyone did. Everyone like set aside half their day and to do this, and that's why you only do it once a week.
Exactly. And you wonder why your significant other isn't putting out anymore, and then you realize you're like, oh. So I'm going to correlate testosterone and Jack Daniels in a second, by the way, since you already brought it up.
Interesting.
So every male is different. Males that have issues with estrogen tend to not have as much of an issue with the desensitization of the penis because estrogen doesn't desensitize it as much as progesterone does. Progesterone desensitizes you big time, but it also has to do with dopamine. So if your adrenals are off and your dopamine's off, the release of dopamine is phenomenal for sensitivity in that area. Cabergoline is the drug that people use to counteract the side effects of progesterone when it counteract the side effects of Tren. Well,
it lowers prolactin.
Huh?
Yeah, it lowers prolactin.
Yeah, it lowers prolactin. But what they don't talk about is it's a dopamine antagonist. So one, probably first off, when you're on Tren, you're probably going to get better sleep on cabergoline anyways. But it actually adds sensitivity to the penis. Now, the first time I took cabergoline was obviously counteract side effects of progesterone, prolactin. I had naturally, before anything became a thing, I had prolactin issues or progesterone issues, like where my nipples would get, to this TMI, but my nipples would get filled with liquid. I wasn't like lactating or anything like that, but if I wanted to, I could probably get something out of it, right? But it's different than a lactation. Lactation is completely different. That's like actual milk. So I had this naturally, like when I was a kid, I thought I was like a freak or something like that.
Damn.
But it just depends on how you pathway your steroids, like your natural steroids. So when you're putting testosterone into your body, if you're going to pathway it down a pipeline, you're going to get more progesterone than estrogen, and that's what your body's going to do with it, then it is what it is. So cabergoline was my solution for it. I know there is Prami is another one that helps with prolactin, but that could be another solution. I don't know if it's dopamine antagonist off the top of my head, but I would assume it is. And it's not as strong as cabergoline.
And vitamin B6, I just read a study where there was cabergoline versus vitamin B6 at like triple the dose that you normally take, and they checked the effects on prolactin, because B6 can actually increase dopamine without actually just being an agonist like cabergoline. So vitamin B6 lowered prolactin levels nearly 50%, where cabergoline was slightly more than 50%. So I just actually added in vitamin B6. In the study, it was 300 milligrams a day split into, they didn't say it's timing specifically, but they said a split dose. So I'm assuming morning, lunch, and dinner. And I just started doing this. I didn't know about the desensitization, or could be prolactin related. But when I was 18 or 19, I first had sex, I had the same exact thing where she was like, oh my God, this is like, what is going on right now? It's been hours and hours and hours. We were up all night having sex. And she was like, what is going on? And I don't know if this is TMI for you guys, but there's been times where I've had sex and pretended like I came, because I was like, I'm fucking ready for bed. I'm shit-faced and I want to fall asleep.
Yeah, so I never had to fake it, because it's harder when you're male faking it. But all related to Jack Daniels, because I didn't get to that part. Jack Daniels can affect your prolactin, like it's going to stop your testosterone first off, which can affect your sex drive. But if you're injecting testosterone, your testosterone is testosterone. So then we're going to talk about estrogen. It's still going to increase aromatization. If estrogen gets too high, it can affect penis sensitivity as well. Probably not as much as prolactin, but guess what? If you naturally have prolactin issues, you can have the same thing. I actually would get the opposite. I would get the opposite of alcohol dick or whiskey dick, as they call it. When I used to drink, it would actually sensitize me more. And I don't have 100% answer for you. That makes no sense.
So let me understand that, Dave. All right, so alcohol obviously kills your testosterone. It's horrible for your liver and stuff. How does alcohol affect prolactin?
So I would assume if we pathway it like we do normal steroidogenesis, then it would increase your prolactin, because it's not going to stop that pathway or anything. If anything, it's just going to it's going to block the conversion of testosterone, right? And increase aromatization, which the increase of aromatization is estrogen. But and I would really have to look at the chart. You know what?
But because
I literally drew the steroidogenesis right here. And I don't ever pull this out because I have it pretty much memorized. Okay, so we have cholesterol, pregnenolone. Pregnenolone goes to DHEA, estradiol, testosterone, DHT. Let's see, where's progesterone? Yeah, so progesterone is going to be the start of it. And then, so you have pregnenolone, and pregnenolone can turn to DHEA, and then you can get to testosterone. Progesterone can go down, and then it can convert to cortisol. So, I wonder if it's more of a cortisol issue than anything else.
But so alcohol would actually potentially increase cortisol, and that would have like a stress response in your body.
Yeah, looking at this, that would make more sense, because you have cortisone and stuff like that, which is an anti-inflammatory. People think cortisol is an inflammatory hormone. It's actually anti-inflammatory, like cortisone cream and stuff like that. It's literally like it's a progesterone base, but it's actually anti-inflammatory. But I mean, if the release of like insulin and stuff like that, it can start blocking receptors if you become insulin resistant, because alcohol doesn't make you insulin resistant. I do know that. So you can have actually nerve blocking if that glucose, first off, alcohol, like it's converting to sugar, but if you're blocking that because the insulin resistance issue that does come with it, and then you also have the hormones, well, guess what? You're having a lot of stuff that's affecting nerves at that point. So there is actually, and I guess I never really thought about it so in detail until I just looked at the chart and I'm thinking about it. Because if you throw off your cortisol and it does affect insulin resistance, then insulin resistance, like you want to talk about organs dying off, blood glucose is like the number one thing that's going to kill anything in your body. Like where you have to get it, like finger amputated, or you start losing your brain and your memory and stuff like that. It's from too much blood glucose to the area. But I mean, if it's going to affect every organ of the body, especially if you're doing it at a systemic level. So it could be hormone related. It could be blood glucose related. I guess looking at it, there's just such a alcohol is like the worst drug ever. It's like there's such a downward spiral effect. Like I was just like looking at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was like, the pathways that it has to go down. Like it's like, okay, well, this isn't going to testosterone, so we're just gonna throw this into estrogen. But the thing is, like, progesterone starts before it gets to, like, progesterone actually can figure out a way to get into the testosterone, but if it's not going to convert to the testosterone, then it has to aromatize an estrogen. So you're probably just jacking up your estrogen through the roof.
There's also with alcohol, you get the basically almost like your liver blocking the metabolization of estrogen. So you get reuptake of estrogen. Your estrogen also increases that way too.